On behalf of our team at HBK, I'd like to welcome you to Critical Keys to Recruiting and Retaining Employees for Manufacturers with HBK Manufacturing Solutions with special guests Michael Ross and Mike Estrich. Our session is scheduled for 60 minutes and is being recorded. Please note that all attendees are set up in listen-only mode. If you'd like to submit a question to our panel, please use the question box in the GoToWebinar control bar. A copy of the presentation materials is available for download in the handout section of the GoToWebinar control bar. At the end of the session, you'll be prompted to complete a survey and provide us with feedback on the presentation. For more information and insights, please visit our manufacturing section of our insights page at hbkcpa.com/insights. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Amy.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and good morning to everyone that has joined us today for our next webinar in a series from HBK Manufacturing Solutions. Today, we are really excited to have a couple special guests with us, and those are Michael Ross and Michael Estrich from High Performance, which is one of the divisions of HBK. Michael have worked with a number of our manufacturing clients on different projects really focused on culture, leadership, and some of the struggles that so many manufacturers are going through today with employees and recruiting and retention and just overall labor availability. So for the next hour or so, Michael will be guiding us in a conversation regarding those topics and some things to keep in mind as you are dealing with labor availability issues. Before I turn it over to them, we do have our first poll question. So Michael, if you go to the next slide, we'll give everyone a chance to answer this first poll question. Don't forget, please answer these questions if you are looking for CPE credits. Otherwise, you certainly don't need to. And with that being said, I will turn it over to Michael Ross.
Thank you so much, Amy, for having us on the webinar today. I know we're honored, privileged to be here and to speak to our clients who are living in these unparalleled times. The Great Resignation has affected business owner, operator, entrepreneurs in manufacturing in ways we haven't seen in our lifetimes. Over 4 million people are quitting their jobs month after month. Business owners are forced to find ways to deliver their products while short-staffed, and they're forced to have to look at new ways to retain employees they currently have. And all of this, if we're honest, it brings a lot of fear. Fear that if you say or do the wrong thing, you might lose another employee and be more behind than you already are in delivering your products to your customers. And as leaders, when we're faced with situations like this, we have one of two choices. We can either allow circumstances to dictate what we do, or we can do something different to change our circumstances. Ideally, each of you on this webinar today wants to do the latter. Something I tell leaders all the time is you can't always change what is, but you can work with what is. And I believe the Great Resignation is one of the greatest opportunities we have as leaders. This unparalleled time gives us the opportunity to take a good hard look at ourselves, our organizations, and determine how we can internally improve our cultures, our leaderships, and our systems to become a place where people love to work versus a place that gives them what they need to survive. So today, we have a lot of things that we want to cover as far as the critical keys of recruiting, retaining, and we're going to talk about reskilling employees as well. So let me go to the next slide and go over what we're covering today, because it's really important for us to have a roadmap of all the different elements that are involved with great recruiting, retaining, and reskilling our employees. So I want to talk about this first. I'm going to talk about the 3 intrinsic and extrinsic motivations of all human beings. As leaders, we have to be multidisciplinary in our knowledge and our skills. Leadership is a multidisciplinary skill. So a good starting point is to know what the three intrinsic and extrinsic motivators are of all human beings. That gives us an idea of how to manage things from a sociological and psychological level. And I'll give you those and talk about the relevance behind each one. And then I'm going to bring Mike Estrich in, and he's going to talk about recognizing your competitive landscape. It's important that we know what our competitors are doing to get an edge. And if there is an opportunity for us to tap into some of the resources or the practices that they are doing to recruit high-level talent, to retain high-level talent, and reskill high-level talent, and we definitely should consider those practices for our manufacturing companies as well. And then Mike's going to talk about identifying talent pools and how to find the best employees. So Mike is an expert in this area, and I'm excited for him to share these things with you. And then he's going to turn it back over to me, and I'm going to give you some practical tips for recruiting, retaining, and reskilling employees, keeping those three intrinsic and extrinsic motivators in mind. There's very simple things we can do today, starting today, that will help us recruit, retain, and reskill our employees. And then I want to talk about building a culture of sustainable growth. This is my area of expertise, is culture and leadership. And I've studied this for almost 20 years. And I've helped organizations really build a culture that sustains over time. All of us have to think about our legacy. All of us have to think about the next generation in our manufacturing companies. And I just want to give you practical things that you can do to set your culture up to be sustainable, both in growth and in succession. And then I want to talk about some simple ways for empowering employees to take ownership. You know, one thing I hear all the time from leaders is, I just want people to take ownership. I just want them to take charge of their roles and responsibilities and their position and treat the company as if it was theirs. So I want to give you some practical ways that we can do that as leaders. And then at the end, we'll offer some time for Q&A. I really think it's important that we answer some high-level questions that are things you're dealing with right now, because what usually happens in groups like this, when one person asks a question, it's a question that somebody else has thought of or is considering right now. And it's important that we get down to brass tacks of things you're actually dealing with today, so we can give you some answers, and you have a lot of value of spending this hour with us, which we are honored and privileged that you're here with us today. So let's dive into the three extrinsic and three intrinsic motivators of all human beings. Now, where I got this data from was from a couple of different studies. There was one study done by Harvard Business where they were diving into what truly makes people fulfilled at work, and what are the things that people perceive make them happy from their work. What's most important as leaders is that we put people in positions to be successful in their careers, both with extrinsic or tangible rewards, but more importantly is that we provide an environment for them where they can be fulfilled. And what the research shows is when we put people in a position to be fulfilled intrinsically, they have more loyalty, they have more engagement, they have higher productivity, they are better in cooperation, and they are better communicators. And so it is very important that we get our heads wrapped around these three extrinsic and three intrinsic motivators. So let's first talk about the three extrinsic motivators. So three extrinsic motivators are money, fame, and power. And here's the thing, if you look at these three words in a silo and you choose to look at them from a negative perspective, it's easy to conclude that human beings are greedy, they're selfish, and they're wanting to control others. But if you look at them from the opposite angle, from the positive perspective, you can conclude that people need money. They need money to take care of their fundamental needs: shelter, food, utilities, transportation. And the desire for money is one that is fundamental to every human being. And when people work, they want to be fairly compensated for the value it provides their organizations. And now we go on to fame. When you look at fame or prestige, people have an urge to be recognized, appreciated, and valued for the work that they do. None of us want to live an obscure life that doesn't make an impact. We all desire to make an impact, and therefore being recognized and pseudo famous in our organizations is a positive motivation. And then power is also a fundamental urge. Now, humans want to know that they have a say in the way their lives turn out. To give up your power means you're not free to make your own choices, not free to come and go as you please. And without a sense of power, we can become powerless, which breeds despair, depression, and fear. And we don't want any of our employees motivated by that. Extrinsic motivators need to be authentically communicated to our potential employees and our current employees. We need to communicate that we understand the value of these things and the impact they have on people's lives. And the better we do this, the more connected we will be with our people and the more loyal they will become. So the biggest thing I want you to take away from the extrinsic motivators is, yes, can people fall into greed? Can they fall into selfishness and want every last bit of attention to be on them? Yes. Do people sometimes use power to lord over others? Yes, they do, unfortunately. But the fundamental urge of these extrinsic motivators are positive. We all need money to survive. We need money to put food on the table, to go on vacations with our family, to provide shelter for ourselves. We all want to be recognized. We all want a bit of prestige in our life to make sure that we're not living obscure lives. And then finally, with power, we want to know that we have a say. We have a say in the way our lives turn out, that we can change our circumstances if necessary, that if I'm working for an organization and there's something I see that needs changed, that I do have the power at least to say in changing those circumstances for the better. And that's really what we want to focus on as leaders, is the more positive aspects of this, and make sure that if people aren't living from a positive perspective with money, prestige, or power, that we call that out and that we're direct in calling that out when they occur. So let's go ahead and move on to the three intrinsic motivations of all humans. I'll spend a little more time here because these are so vital to our organizations and to our people, and they do help us to recruit better, to retain more, and to reskill our employees in the proper way. So the three intrinsic motivators, these are the intangible motivations that are much more powerful than extrinsic motivations. And these are the core building blocks, as I mentioned, to great recruiting and retention efforts. So let's talk about number one. Number one is everyone wants to feel like they're making progress in their life. Deep down, people do not expect perfection from themselves. They know that life is a journey. They know that there's going to be resistance and struggle in their lives. But what they expect is improvement in order for them to be on track and to see that they're making progress. And what we've got to do as leaders is we've got to help them see that. And how we do that is we give them clearly defined goals. We need to help them sharpen their skills to get better, to improve. And we need to consistently give them feedback and encouragement towards their development. Now, each of us have had times in our lives where we've made significant progress. This is why that often it's worth chasing a goal that is sometimes a struggle for us, because by the time we achieve this goal, we feel really fulfilled. But it's not just about achieving the goal, it's what we become in chasing that goal. It's how we improve in chasing that goal that gives us great fulfillment. And it is in the progress. It's in the progress, and it's in people's progress where they see metamorphosis, and we look back and appreciate the difficulties that come with us making progress as well. People often look back on times of struggle and are grateful that they went through it, because they wouldn't be where they are today without it. And so for us as leaders, we need to make sure that people know what is expected of them, that they understand how they contribute to the organization, and they need to see how them improving in their skill sets and in fighting through struggles and being perseverant and leaning into adversity is going to help them get better. And by them getting better, they're strengthening the organization. You know, one thing I talk about in culture all the time is each of us is not as important as all of us, and all of us is not as important as each of us. And there's a balance there, that if everybody takes their role and responsibility seriously and they own their side of the organization, and they're constantly working on their skills and getting better at what they do, they benefit everybody. And then the organization has to provide the means and the resources for them to fulfill their roles properly. So everyone wants to feel like they're making progress. And when we feel like we're making progress, we have fulfillment in what we do. And the number one reason why people stay with an organization is they've helped them develop personally. They've helped them improve and get better. The number one reason why people stay with a company. So that is very important. So progress is number one. Let's go on to number two. Everyone wants to be connected in relationships. Specifically, the word connection points to being with people in like values, purpose, and vision. It is true connection with others that we learn more about ourselves, and we get to see how our talents and abilities and relational qualities affect those we spend time with. In relationships, we have a sense of belonging, that we're not alone, and a sense of meaning. Our organization should be the perfect environment where we invite people to connect in the meaningful work that we all do. We are all doing very, very meaningful work. The things you do have a great impact on people's lives. And it's important, we'll talk more about this in a second, but it's really important that we connect our people around the fact that we are doing very meaningful things in life. So let's move on to number three. Everyone wants to belong and contribute to a purpose bigger than self. Everyone wants to belong and contribute to a purpose bigger than self. You know, so often business owners I've talked to through the years mitigate their purpose. A manufacturing company sometimes believes that they only create parts for aerospace, rail, auto, or heavy equipment. Healthcare providers may believe that they only work on certain parts of the human body, but mitigate the holistic effects it has on a person's life. Financial services providers may believe they only manage portfolios or conduct tax and audits to make sure that people are within compliance. Those things are what people do, but it does not point to the purpose of why their business exists. Every business exists fundamentally for the same reason: to improve the quality of life for humankind. Manufacturers create parts so that they can help people travel to safer to their destinations. They create safer equipment. They create innovations for us to be able to move, breathe, and live in more efficient and effective ways. So what you do as manufacturers is really affecting mankind in a positive way. And it is vital that you recognize that purpose and you're able to communicate that purpose to your team. In all the studies of purpose, if you look back throughout history of all the philosophy discourses, or you look at data in scientific studies, or you think about the conversations that you have had with other people about living with a sense of purpose, it all comes down to the same thing. People feel most fulfilled when they are affecting other people's lives for positive change or positive impact. This is why it's hard for us. If somebody calls you on the phone and they ask you a question, this big broad question, they say, "Can you help me with something?" Instantaneously, something rises up inside of you. There's an energy that rises up inside of you, and you instantly say, "Yeah, what do you need?" It is a fundamental urge of all of ours to help other people. And so what we've got to do is be very clear of communicating our purpose, and then communicate how our team members contribute to the purpose of helping our customers, our clients, and even our vendors have a better experience and a better life. So with that said, those are the 3 extrinsic and intrinsic motivators. And I'd love for you to get your head really wrapped around this and start to think about how you contribute to money, prestige, power, and how you perpetuate progress, connection, and belonging and contributing to purpose. So with that said, I want to turn it over to Mike Estrich. And Mike is going to talk about recognizing the competitive landscape when it comes to recruiting and retention.
Thank you,
yours,
Michael.
Mike.
Thank you. So, I'm going to get into a little bit block and tackling here, a little bit different. Mike's keeping a really high level there, but let's talk about this. So, if any of you have been paying attention to your LinkedIn connections, you probably noticed a lot of job changes happening over the last year, and kind of what's been deemed, what Michael talked about earlier, the Great Resignation. But what surprised me is where a lot of these people are landing. Most are now working for companies headquartered in other states than where they live, and in some instances, even other countries. So it's kind of interesting. Okay, so why? We've noticed that through COVID and the remote workforce, the traditional office settings are not always applicable for some of these sought-after positions, and so people are going after hybrid or remote positions. Now, why this may not impact production employees at a manufacturer, it does impact other critical roles at your company. So on average, small to medium-sized manufacturing companies, non-production staff is anywhere between 25 to 50% of the total headcount, meaning that there's an opportunity to either retain or find talented engineers, purchasing, finance, technology, and support staff that could work remotely. And if the pandemic, again, has taught us anything, these remote workers can still be extremely productive for your company. And your savvy competitors are taking note of that. Your competitors are looking to attract talent away from your company and others, sometimes with just the offering of a flexible work schedule or hybrid work schedule. So how do you stay ahead of the curve? As owners and managers, if you don't know how your competition is recruiting talent, you're granting them a cloak of invisibility, and in turn hurting your ability to position yourself against them to hire great people. So if you're struggling to hire some key positions, but notice your competition isn't, you may need to start monitoring your competitors' recruitment activities to analyze why they're having success and why you're not. So how do you accomplish this? We'll get into that block and tackling here. So follow your competitors, both big and small, on LinkedIn, Indeed, and others. Evaluate how they position themselves and their company in the employment ads and job descriptions. Look at what buzzwords they're using, what buzzwords they're avoiding, and how restrictive they are or loose on their applicant qualifications. I'll give you an example. So prior to joining HBK, I was doing my job search. I just sat there scratching my head at a couple of these job ads that they're asking for 15 years of experience in small niche markets. And then I look, okay, how long has this job ad been up? Oh, 180 plus days, go figure. So it's one of those things of, they're not only looking for a needle in a haystack, but expecting that needle to find them. So think about that when you're putting those job ads together. Other things to pay close attention to is salary, benefits, other incentives, and ask yourself, are we offering an attractive compensation package? Could you be offering more benefits with little out-of-pocket costs, such as long-term care or disability insurance, to be more competitive, give yourself an edge? And use these data points to help build and construct a good recruitment process. On the next slide, we're going to get into just kind of, saying, hey, this is not just something that is, a secret. It's pretty explicit. I found this funny. I was up on Twitter the other day, and a recruiter said, every time a competitor mentions return to office, our recruiters reach out to their people. We just hired 15 of their engineers over the last 2 months. Is that easy? It's taking candy from a baby. So, you have that ability to do the same. Make sure you're monitoring and looking to see what your competitors are doing and take advantage of it. So if we go to the next slide on identifying talent pools, what if you're really struggling to find good people for both production and non-production jobs? Let's take an easy look to identifying where you could find some people. So the best starting point is with people you already know and who already know you, your employees. Talented, smart, independent, hardworking employees prefer to work with like-minded individuals. Let them know about open positions. I'll give you an example. So I was meeting with an old client a little while ago over a beer, and he's running a $30 million OEM company. They've just brought back in machining in-house, plastics injection molding in-house. And I said, well, how's it going? You know, people are struggling to get people. And he goes, fantastic. And I go, really? Tell me more. He goes, all right, we've hired 38 people in the last 6 months, including 18 machinists. Now, any of you that are in any type of need of a machinist know that during the normal times, finding a good machinist is hard, let alone in a pandemic. I said, all right, how'd you do this? He goes, well, it starts with our culture. You know, we have a culture of helping each other and driving success with one another. And if someone doesn't fit our culture that we have that's in a position, we either help shift them to fit our culture or get them out, because it's not worth having one bad egg in our organization. I said, okay, well, that's part of it, but what else? He goes, well, something that we do different is we offer profit sharing. So those employees that are successful want other successful employees joining them because, hey, you're going to get more money at the end of the year because we're all going to be winning together. And he goes, if we hire 1 or 2 machinists from another manufacturer and they've got a bunch of machinists there, they're telling their friends and their buddies that are ex-coworkers, you need to get back over here because the grass really is greener. And I was like, well, that's phenomenal. You mind if I share that? He goes, go ahead. Just don't do it in Erie. I said, okay, fair enough. So, you know, other things to look at when you're talking to your employees. Help managers and department heads build a cohesive picture of an ideal candidate and for the roles that they need to fill within your company. It'll help you with the recruiting process. It'll also give everyone a focus on what is critical to the success of the role when you're interviewing candidates. If you're looking at putting out incentives for hiring referrals, make sure it's significant. You know, a $250 bonus may sound nice, but is it significant enough to get someone to proactively recruit good talent for your company? Things to consider when putting together an incentive. How much, you know, is employee turnover hurting you financially when it comes to the time it takes and energy it takes for onboarding, training, and the loss of that employee if they don't work out? Put a number to it. How much does underperformance cost your company? Put a number to it. How much business are you losing by not being able to fill orders? Put a number to it. How critical is the work being done in that position? Put a number to it. You know, those are what's going to help you figure out what's going to be that number that's going to be worthwhile for you to get good talent and retain good talent. Okay, now the next part I'm going to talk about is using your business relationships on social networking for business-focused social networks like LinkedIn. Okay, so you have open positions. You need to find those. Talk to your vendors. Your key vendors are meeting with hundreds of companies that look just like you. Let them know what you're looking for. They may know a rock star looking to change. Open up to your peers and centers of influence. Let them know that you have a need for recruiting talent. They may have someone or that's knows that they're looking for a change, or may even have a fresh new look at recruiting that you could steal some ideas from a different business sector. Post opportunities, industry trade groups. Don't be afraid to let them know you're looking. Hey, we've got a great opportunity here. You should join us. And don't be afraid to reach out and ask other high performers in your industry if they know of anyone looking for a change. Their answers might surprise you. They might look to change to work with you. Another area would help is don't be afraid to outsource key positions. Many individuals who've resigned from their last position are hanging up their own shingle in the Great Resignation. These talented folks, such as marketers, engineers, sales managers, business managers, controllers, etc., have a lot to offer your company. Engaging with engineers for hire, controllers for hire, even temporarily as a stopgap, may be a great alternative to feeling the rush and pressure to hire these key positions. And using outsourced, I'll call them rock stars for hire, you may also help you redefine what you're looking for in the role you're trying to fill in your organization. And the last thing I'm going to help with an idea is, if you don't have the bandwidth, or worse yet, not a great track record of hiring the right talent, consider engaging a recruitment firm. They can help you clearly define roles and responsibilities. They can give you insight to current trends in compensation structure, regionally as well as nationally. They can also help you determine if the position can be on-site, fully remote, or a hybrid of the two. And lastly, these recruiting firms may already have some great talent pools of qualified individuals from past recruitment engagements that would fit well for your company. So I hope these are just some good ideas. Let me hand the presentation back to Michael as he talks about some practical tips for recruiting and retaining and reskilling employees.
Thank you, Mike. So while we do this, we have our second poll question that we're going to put up real quick before I dive into some of the practical tips for recruiting, retention, and reskilling. So you take a moment. All right. Great. Okay, so I'm going to dive into the next slide here. And as I dive into this, I want to use a quick analogy. And I want to say this very clearly. All the stuff Mike just talked about, that is practical stuff you can start doing today. And if you need to follow up with Mike, his email will be available at the end. And I would say follow up with him. And he just knows this space really well. And we want to be here for you to answer any questions that you might have. So before we go into these simple tips, I gotta use an analogy, okay? And I want to say this: recruiting and retention and reskilling are all dropped into the same bucket. And if you think about professional sports in this analogy, there's free agency, and athletes are under contract for a few years, and nearing the end of free agency, there's heavy organizational recruiting efforts that go into full gear. Now, during the time that athletes are with an organization, what are they doing? They're reskilling them. They're constantly trying to improve their skills and make them better and better and better. Sometimes they take them into hybrid positions. You know, baseball teams they'll put a second baseman at shortstop in case the shortstop gets hurt and they can't bring somebody up quickly, or at third base or at first base. Catchers sometimes have to go to first base. They have, especially going into the playoff time where National League plays the American League, pitchers have to hit, you know, from the American League that aren't used to hitting. So they're constantly reskilling, they're constantly practicing their skills and trying to improve them while they're there. They have pitching coaches, they have infield coaches, they have outfield coaches, all there to help reskill. And they spend a lot of time recruiting people out of high school and college to go to their organizations, to either play in the farm clubs or to play in the professional leagues. But then they're always recruiting them to stay at the organization. They're always talking to them about why their organization is the best, and they're not going to get the same experience elsewhere. And we need to make sure that we're treating it the same way, that we're always recruiting our people. And I always suggest there's a term that I use a lot. It's called internal marketing. And it's not about bragging. It's not about, you know, trying to compare yourself to other people, but it's pointing to the things that you do well and always putting that in the forefront of people's minds. Just something to keep in mind, 80% of our thoughts are negative. It's very easy for people to fall into a negative disposition in our organization unless we are proactive, are perpetuating positive news. Anyone who watches the news, for example, 93% of all news media outlets are giving negative news 93% of the time. So we have to make sure that we're proactive in talking about the positive things going on in our organization, because that helps to retain the high-level talent that we have recruited. So with that said, let's dive into some practical tips of recruiting, retaining, and reskilling. So number one is, as I talked about in the 3 intrinsic motivators, is know and communicate your purpose. Communicate your purpose proactively and reactively in your organization at all times. So when you're having a conversation with somebody who's maybe frustrated, maybe a little bit out of sorts, remind them of the purpose of why you exist. Because oftentimes, we as human beings, the tendency is we can get a little bit selfish. We can get me focused from time to time. And what's important is that we remind people that their skills, their talents, their abilities, their roles and responsibilities are here to help someone else. And there's an old proverb that says, they who refresh others will themselves be refreshed. So the more that we focus on our refreshment and others, the more fulfilled we'll be, the more refreshed we'll be. Now, I would ask you all to make sure you're not haphazard in this. Make sure that you clarify the purpose of your organization and you're able to communicate that and communicate it through internal marketing efforts at your manufacturing company. And your purpose has to be something that stirs passion in you and your executive team. Because if it doesn't stir passion in you, you're not going to have the passion to communicate it to others. And if you're recruiting somebody, another thing to do with your purpose is to make sure you communicate that up front when you're in the interview process, okay? And what you want to look for are tells. So when you're communicating your purpose, you want to see what their reaction is. Ask them a couple questions in alignment with their purpose. And if you don't see equal passion for your purpose, consider whether or not the person you're speaking to is the right fit for your organization. Because just because somebody has the talent, technical skills, or even advanced degrees does not mean they're the right fit for your culture. And Mike mentioned this earlier. One bad apple spoils the bunch. And someone who is to the overall purpose of your organization, even with the great talent, skills, and even professionalism they may show, they're going to take away from the overall energy of contributing to that purpose. So they must have a passion for your purpose, or they're simply filling a role. Additionally, talk to your team about specific ways you are fulfilling your purpose. Use testimonials from your clients and your customers in team meetings. Reward people for fulfilling your purpose and create artifacts in your organization that communicate your purpose. I know a lot of organizations that I've worked with over the years, they will put up banners that talk about their purpose in a short, quick way. Some organizations that I've worked with, they print out on banners. They put a client's picture and a testimonial from that client, just so people can see it regularly, and it helps remind them of why they're doing what they are doing, of why they're working so hard. When the struggle comes, they remember that there's something deeper behind why they're doing what they're doing. So know and communicate your purpose, and that helps with recruiting efforts as well. Having those things up so people can see that this organization is different. The next thing is be clear about your vision. Unfortunately, according to Harvard Business, 97% of organizations do not have a clear communicated vision. And people want to know where you are going and how they contribute. They want to know what the growth that you desire is. They want to know how they contribute to that. They want to know how their role and responsibility is feeding the overall goals of the organization. So you've got to be clear about where you are going. Now think about this from this analogy. If I were to come pick you up in a stretch Hummer, and I just pull into your house and I go, hey, let's go for a ride. You may see the stretch Hummer. Maybe you've not been in one before and you're like, that's awesome. I'm going to jump in. I'm going to take a ride with Michael. And then we start driving around. And let's say we're driving for 15, 20 minutes. What's the fundamental question you're going to ask? Where are we going? Where are we heading? If I go, I don't know, but I'll pay you some money to stay in the Hummer with me. You may agree. You say, okay, he's going to pay me a good amount of money just to ride. All right, I'll ride. But even with money in this cool car, if we're driving around for a while, you're going to start looking at your watch. You're going to say, where are we going? Now, if you don't have a clear vision for your organization, you're lost, and people start to feel lost. And think about this from an intrinsic standpoint. If you've ever been lost in your life, you've ever been lost in the woods, I know I've been lost in a department store before, but you've been lost, you start to feel frustrated, you start to feel fearful, you can be a bit combative. So what we want to do is clarify where we are going as organizations and communicate that regularly to their team, so they know that their work does have a purpose, but it's also a purpose that is on a journey heading somewhere. And we can mark off goals along the way and make sure we communicate that to our teams. And then the last one is know the who, the what, and the why. So in alignment with purpose, know who is supposed to do what and why they are supposed to do it. Who is supposed to do what and why they are supposed to do it. This is often under-communicated in organizations. If people do not have clear expectations from their leaders, meaning you don't set goals for them, it's not clear about what they're supposed to do and why they're supposed to do it, people tend to underperform. When you set clear expectations, not only do people feel more empowered, but people also can be accountable. I often get questions about accountability. And what I always tell leaders is put people in a position where they can be accountable versus having to hold them accountable. And oftentimes when people want to hold others accountable, what I have found is there wasn't clear expectations for the person to begin with. Now, if there are, that's a completely different conversation. You've got to remind people of who they are, what they're supposed to do, and why it matters. And if they choose not to fulfill that, then you have to have a consideration of whether or not they're a good fit for your culture. But please set clear expectations. There's no time more important than you clarifying expectations so that someone can be accountable. And when you can do this consistently, you're going to retain more people because it puts them at peace, it gives them ease of mind, and you'll be able to recruit at higher levels because you can say, as you bring somebody in and you tell them how you operate, you say, hey, here's the purpose we work from, here's the purpose we work with, our vision, and then we know exactly why we're bringing you in here. We know exactly who you are and the talents that you have and the abilities that you have. We know exactly what you're going to do and why it matters. So us recruiting you to our organization was well thought out, and we need someone just like you to come and help us fulfill our purpose and vision. And then finally, this one cannot be undersold at all. We have to be intentional about improvement. One thing that I heard during the Great Resignation, and it's still going on, but one thing I've heard over and over again from employees who have left organizations is when they've gotten reviews, oftentimes those reviews were done very haphazardly. There wasn't good feedback. And the people that I have spoken to have said, I had my leader come in and just basically tell me, just keep doing what you're doing. And the person knew that they weren't living up to their full potential, and they weren't told how they could improve. They were just told, keep doing what you're doing, because the leaders were afraid if they give negative feedback that this person might leave me during this unparalleled time. But what I would tell you is be intentional about improvement. Evaluate your team constantly. Tell them how they can get better. People want to make progress, but it's important that we're candid, kind, not nice, bold, but not bullies, and we're telling people how we can improve. Just remember this: systems run businesses and people run systems. And we oftentimes, when things don't go right, people often look at other people and start to get in judgment and resentment towards them. But really, most of the issues that we have in our organizations, they're systems problems. The system has broken down. Communication systems have broken down. A machine is down for a few hours. Our process gets screwed up by some way, shape, or form. Could be a vendor, could be a customer who didn't do what they're supposed to do. But we got to limit the frustration we have between our people by looking at the systems problems first. And that will help us engage in more confrontation and be a little more at ease when engaging confrontation. All right, so let's go on to the third poll question, just making sure that we have confirmed attendance for our CPE. Give me a second to do that, and then we'll move on. Okay, so in building a powerful culture, what we have to do is, first of all, we have to talk regularly with our team. I always recommend that as an overall organization, you're meeting with your team at least once a month to talk about some things that really matter. And that is your purpose, that is your vision, and then there are expectations. So the expectations come down to, number one, your values. So values have the greatest market value. So we want to have some clearly defined values that we can live every day. So for example, one manufacturing company that I work with, they identified 3 values that they felt if they live every day, it's going to help them fulfill their vision and their purpose. And they picked attitude, they picked personal responsibility, and they picked quality. Those 3 things were very important to them, and they identified what each one looks like practically. And so every month they get together and they evaluate themselves on how well they are living these values. And as they're bringing in new team members, they're also recruiting to those values. They want people who are already living those values. Now, I'm a Browns fan, and I don't typically have a great affinity for the Steelers, but I do respect the Steelers. And the Steelers, when they're recruiting, they have a set of values that they're looking at consistently to whether or not they're going to bring somebody into their team. And they butt it up against their values. And they say, we don't hire football players, we hire Pittsburgh Steelers, which I think is a great method for us to take. So you got to know your values. You have to know what your expectations are as well to your team. You have to know the things that you want your team members to focus on when they're at your organization every single day. So set behavioral values, set role and responsibility expectations. So everybody should know when they come in what their role and responsibility is, and be very, very clear about it. And if they're getting outside of that zone, you have a conversation and rectify and make a course correction. And then finally, you've got to have expectations for cooperation, how people treat one another, how we communicate to one another. There is a simple value of respect that we all have to have for one another if we're going to have a great culture. And people should not step outside of treating each other with respect. And you can have confrontation, and you can have situations where people are having a hard time with one another and still treat each other with respect and attack the problem together. But if we start treating each other with disrespect and we're not cooperative to one another, then we're going to have difficulty solving any problem. So those are some practical things that you can do inside your organization. Now, the last thing is empowering employees to take ownership. Thing is, you got to talk regularly with people. Now, I don't suggest you just have a bunch of formalized meetings set. You can do that if you would like, but I'm talking just having feedback conversations with people so you can ask questions and you can listen intently. So if you want people to take ownership, you've got to give them a say. People won't take ownership unless they have a say in the way things are going. Now, people say there's no such thing as a bad idea. Sometimes there is, okay? And it may be something you shelve for a while, but what you've got to do as a leader is be very, very intent in listening when people are offering suggestions, and continue to ask follow-up questions to get people thinking critically so they can offer more suggestions and ideas. And then what you've got to do is you got to give them a chance to practice. Now, here's what I always suggest. Start when they first come in, okay? So if someone always ask, how can we improve things? How can we make our systems better? How can we cooperate better? How can we communicate better? Ask the team their opinion on these things. okay? And when someone first comes in, give them little tiny opportunities to practice, okay? So don't give them heavy role and responsibility right off the bat to practice something they have an idea for. Give them a chance to see how they follow through when you've given them a chance to practice. And then you evaluate, and then you go back to the drawing board and you see how it went, you communicate with them, but you continue the process of empowerment. You continue to give them chances to practice. And by the time they've had a lot of experience, they're used to just thinking on their own. And then at some point, you want them to just take absolute ownership of that role and responsibility in your organization. All right, so last poll question, and then we'll get into Q&A. All right, so if there's any questions, you can shoot it in the chat. Mike and I are available.
We did just receive a question. The question is, what should I do with current employees who are unhappy and are threatening to quit?
Yeah, I think that's a question we've all dealt with a lot. That's a really great question. So I think you just have to, if you're hearing that through the grapevine, because that's often what happens, we hear something through the grapevine, I think you just go after it directly. You know, pull them aside, maybe take them to lunch and ask them as many questions as possible. You know, why are they unhappy? You know, and then really evaluate whether or not it's something that is in your control or outside your control. Because sometimes people get resentful towards other people in the organization. Maybe they're resentful about something that happened 5 years ago and they're still holding on to it. If that's the case, you have to speak very directly and kindly. You say, hey, it sounds like you're holding on to a lot of resentment. And, you know, we've done everything in our power to rectify the situation that you're dealing with. And, you know, if you don't let go of it, then you're never going to have a good experience here, because whatever somebody focuses on is going to grow in their life. And resentment's one of those things you hear a lot of in an organization. They're holding on to something that happened 5-10 years ago, and it's not relevant for today. So you got to determine that. But if there are real tangible things that they're unhappy about, I would do everything in your power to rectify that for them. But you're never going to know unless you dive in and ask questions. And I would have people who are going to report to you if they're hearing anybody talk about that, and you want to go after it directly. So just make sure that you take them aside, you praise in public, you criticize in private, you have confrontation in private. Make sure you do it with you and maybe an HR director. You sit down, you talk directly with them about their concerns. That's my short answer to that one.
And the next question that just came in is, what's an easy way to monitor the competition's recruitment activities?
I'll take that one if that's all right. So a real simple way is to put yourself in the position of someone who's looking for that open role. You know, what kind of keywords would they be searching for or thinking of, and then create an automatic search on Indeed or LinkedIn that will actually feed you into your email those results. And you can put like a 50-mile radius on it. And that way you don't have to spend time searching for it directly. It'll be sent to you, and you can forward that to someone else on your team if you need to. But it'd be a great way to do that. You can also follow your competitors on LinkedIn and Indeed, and you can see what their activity is. And again, you can set up automatic emails that you'll get sent to you, so you can see what's happening, updates that they're doing, and stay on top of it in a very simplistic way.
Great. Well, I'm not hearing any other questions, so we'll go ahead and wrap this up and bring it to a close. So we would love to connect with you further about your recruiting, your retention, your reskilling, and as I mentioned before, it's really about building a powerful culture, building a strong culture, making sure you're clear about your purpose, making sure you're clear about your vision, making sure you're clear in your expectations, and that you have the leadership to sustain a powerful culture. And so we'd love to connect with you further. We have some complimentary offers for you today. We have 3 assessments that are available to any of you who would like to take advantage of them. And we have a business health assessment, which helps evaluate your business from top to bottom to see how you're currently operating. And then we can help you identify any gap areas that you have, and we give high-level recommendations for you in a report. The next thing is we have a culture health assessment, which is it's part quantitative, part qualitative. It's something that you can send out to your entire organization to see how you're doing. How is your culture? What is the health of your culture right now? So you can pick up on issues that may be keeping you from retaining people and things that could help you turn around and recruit and reskill your current employees. And then finally, we have a leadership health assessment. So leadership's a multidisciplinary skill. So the leadership health assessment gives you a nice view of how you're currently operating as a leader. And then with that as well, we can give you some recommendations on how you can improve and some things to consider as you move forward. That also comes with a 30-minute consultation with Mike and myself, and we can talk through the assessment with you. Or if you want to bypass the assessment, you can set up a 30-minute consultation with us concerning the matters that we discussed today. And you can set that up by emailing Mike Estrich at mestrich@hbkcpa.com. And we would be more than happy to sit down with you for 30 minutes and discuss any of the issues that you have concerning the topic today. So as we come to a close, I'd also like to invite everybody to connect with me on LinkedIn. I try to post a few times a week, meaningful and thoughtful things that can help you in the current day. As we come to a close, I love John Wooden. He is one of the greatest leaders, in my opinion, in the sports world. And he said that success is peace of mind attained only through self-satisfaction and knowing you made the best effort. Do the best of what you're capable. All of you are capable of recruiting, retention, and reskilling. And so it's all up to all of us to just live up to that capability and continue to learn and grow so that we can provide the best opportunities for those who are going to work with us and those who currently work with us. I want to thank you all so much for joining us today. And on behalf of HBK, I am honored and privileged to serve you. I'll turn it back over to Amy and Michelle.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks everyone for joining us today. We will see you next month.